right, good to have you with us. It's been a while since we last published any content, and you'll hear in a moment why this is the case. The following interview was published on the Scaling Japan podcast, hosted by Tyson Batino. Highly recommended podcast, by the way. Tyson is a business mentor and advisor for startups and small, medium businesses in Japan, 500 global mentor, and an all-out outstanding individual. And he wanted me to come on and talk to his audience about franchising in Japan as an investment and as a path to residency. So we talked all about the franchise industry locally and globally, who are these opportunities right for and who they're not so right for. Required capital, managing expectations, due diligence, profitability, hiring, firing, training, advertising, much, much more. So nice deep dive into one of the main things that we do here at Nippon Bridge. Hope you enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you again on the other side.
Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I am your host, Tyson Batino, and on today's episode, we have Ziv Nakajima Magen. And he is the co-founder and partner at Nippon Tradings International and Nippon Bridge. He is a well-known expert for property investments and real estate in Japan. Pretty much anyone who's based in Japan probably knows of Ziv. And he also runs the Japan Real Estate podcast. Or at least I know. So. And he runs the Japan Real Estate podcast, and also helps foreigners buy and operate franchise stores and offices in Japan as franchisees under Japanese franchisor networks. He is going to tell us the ins and outs of purchasing a franchise in Japan. So it's so great to have you, Ziv, and could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for those kind words in the introduction. I'm actually a big fan of yours as well. So I like the work that you do. But I've come to Japan about 12 years ago now, and been coming and going for the 10 years before that as well, but living here on a more permanent basis in the last decade or so. And my wife and partner, and I have set up Nippon Tradings International shortly before we moved here, because we were buying some property investments for our own portfolio. And then having gone through the process, we realized that Japan being Japan and real estate is no different. It's always challenging for foreigners, non-residents or residents, even if they don't completely fluently speak the language. It's difficult for them to conduct business here, and we figured that we could probably provide that service for people who are interested in real estate in Japan. And we've been doing that for the past 11 years, 12 years now. And then about a year ago, I've met another business partner who had a similar idea related to bridging the gap between Japan and foreigners. She was focusing more on affordable relocation support services, which are very expensive in Japan. And I had the idea for a couple of years before that. Now, as a result of the questions that we regularly get asked, property investors are usually happy with safe and stable and lower yields, but there are a lot of people out there who are looking for potentially more profitable businesses to conduct within the Japanese framework. And also a lot of people who are interested in immigrating to Japan or residing in Japan based on a business visa, which can be done with property investments, but it's not a smooth process and it requires rather large capital for this purpose. So I've always had the seed of an idea in my mind to somehow facilitate other types of investments by foreigners into Japan. And then because these remote investors, foreign investors, they're not going to be here physically to manage the businesses, run the businesses. Even if they do end up moving here, the business might be geared towards Japanese clientele. The staff might be Japanese. And as those of us who live in Japan know, when the gaijin business owner shows his face around the business, it's not always generating the best results, right? It's great if it's a gaijin bar or an English school or something that's foreigner oriented. But if you're running, for example, a fashion or clothes store in Japan, or you're selling secondhand goods in Japan, and suddenly there's a gaijin there, it tends to freak both the staff and the clientele out.
Yes, I would say it's like, is this it quote is like, is this company daijoubu?
Yeah, right. We always got this Ayashi, suspicious foreigner vibe around us, no matter what we do in Japan. So we quickly realized that not only should we enable people to invest in those businesses, we should also be the people managing them physically on their behalf. So the hiring, the firing, stock management,
Ah.
and so forth, they would need us similar to how they need us with real estate investment. They would need us not just for the purchase, but for the
Mm,
ongoing operations as well. And because we obviously, I mean, we've got our hands in a few pies, but we're not jacks of all trades. We wouldn't presume to be able to run a clothes business or a secondhand luxury goods or an after school tutoring center, whatever the case may be. We don't have the know-how and the knowledge. And also that doesn't really fit into the framework of remote management on the investor side if they have to constantly be involved in marketing and advertising and figuring out how to set up and get licensing and so forth. And then franchising just became a really
mm,
sort of no-brainer option for us. So what we do is we create the relationship with the franchisor who might be open to or looking for investors, franchisees. We facilitate the relationship. We represent the investor in the setting up of the business. But the advantage is that we get the entire blueprint and handholding and guidance from the franchisor network on the entire process of setting up and then operating the business. So we've been doing that plus the relocation support services for the past year and a bit. We're taking it very slow, as we did with NTI at the start. We have two test case clients that are, one of them has already opened their franchise. The other one is just in the process of doing that now. So we're not really advertising the service to the general public
mm.
until we make sure that we have a smooth operating procedure, but it's definitely happening, yes.
And one thing that has impressed me about you is that slow moving approach, but it's actually, I would say, from a long term viewpoint, it's actually a, let's say, not a fast moving approach, but it's a very safe, secure, stable approach for Japan. Because I think a lot of foreigners, they try to rush things too quickly. But, it's someone with like Ziv. He, what has impressed me is that he really values the relationships with the Japanese side and is not going to burn bridges. And for that reason, Ziv has a very good reputation, not only on the foreign side, but on the Japanese end, which is extremely important if you really want to scale in Japan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, the thing is, and we learned this very quickly with real estate, is if anywhere in you can go somewhere and say, hi, I'm a foreigner, I got money, I want to invest, there'll be an army of people who want to work with you, right? You just have to kind of sift through them and pick the right ones from the not so right ones. In Japan, it's actually the other way around. So you come in with money, you're a foreigner, you don't speak Japanese, you'll have a very hard time, first and foremost, just finding the companies that want to work with you. They're all usually professional, by the book, everything is legal and over the table, but it's a big challenge to find somebody who will wrap their heads around the concept of dealing
Mm.
with a foreign customer, investor, owner, what have you. So the relationships are crucial to our business because it's a lot easier for us to find customers than it is to find Japanese companies to work with.
Thanks for sharing that. And so for the topic of franchise, so yeah, the reason this I wanted to talk about this topic was actually, so we're focusing a lot on market entry right now, and I think this is one effective method of market entry for someone who has the capital to do it. And the other reason for this is I actually do advise a lot of businesses, foreign entrepreneurs and Japanese ones who are creating their own businesses. They're creating systems from scratch. I have a lot of experience in creating systems because of our English language school, which became pretty big. And so I'm helping them with building the systems. But as someone who is a system builder, I really see the value of a franchise because I think it could save someone, depending on level of experience, two, but I'll say for a first timer, maybe even like 4 to 5 years of experience, even 10 years of experience doing a franchise. But other than that, like what I mentioned, what are some other advantages to doing a franchise?
As opposed to a set it up yourself kind of business, yeah?
That is correct.
Yeah. Well, Franchise appeals to, I guess, franchising appeals to two kinds of business owners, essentially. The first is, as you've mentioned, the people who are less than experienced or less than experienced in that particular sector. And they want to learn the works for someone who's already done it on several occasions. So the advantage working with a franchisor network, if it's a good one, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is that they've hopefully already established quite a few franchise locations. They've hopefully already have the blueprint and the procedures in place, and they probably already have connections with suppliers, with renovation companies that know exactly what a store or an office in the franchise should look like. They get good deals on consumables, for example, if you're running a food franchise and so forth. So they hold your hand throughout the process so that you don't have to learn everything from scratch and make all the mistakes from scratch. And the other advantage is that they are a lot more manageable remotely. So because, again, you don't need to know what you're doing in advance, they will provide all of the training to your store manager or office manager. They will provide the books, the guidebooks on how to operate the franchise, and they will provide you with support along the way. It becomes then a very remotable manageable business. So you can actually hire somebody to supersede in operations in your country of choice and run the entire process remotely. It's still a lot more hands-on than you would, for example, with a semi-passive income real estate investment where you just check annual reports. You do need to be more involved on a decision-making basis, but you don't need to be physically present and constantly tweaking everything on your own. So those are the two types of people that franchises normally appeal to.
Yeah, and I really like that because I've hired hundreds of people, and it's there are people who are just good defenders. They can follow the instructions. They'll work hard. They'll do a good job. But there's not that people who are creators, meaning like they can build systems and framework. And so by buying the franchise, you pretty much make yourself like you can hire the type of person you're looking for. It's probably like 80% of the Japanese population versus a creator, which might actually be like 1 to 5%. And so I like how the franchise, going the franchise method opens you up for that much more hiring possibilities.
Yeah, but we should probably also discuss the people that it's not suitable for, right? Because if
Yes.
you end up buying into a franchise operation that is completely alien to everything that you wanted to do with your business, you're not going to enjoy the relationship. You're not going to do very well as well. Because like for us, when we select the franchises that we want to work with, for example, one of the top priorities for us is to know that they have a very, very clear guideline on how everything needs to be done. And that's a strict environment. So if you're the move fast, break thing, Silicon Valley type, you're looking to experiment, you're looking to tweak stuff, you're looking to maybe introduce other products into your business that may have not been there otherwise, a franchise is probably not for you because you're going to be bound by their guidelines, and there's a contract in place. It's not as strict and as litigative as it would be in Western country, but there is a contract in place that you have to abide by, and they can terminate your membership at any point if you don't follow that code, right? And that is the reason that you actually got into the franchise to begin with. They've got a brand name and recognition that they need to maintain. So if you're looking to, if you're the more adventurous type and you're looking to experiment with stuff and you're looking to maybe introduce systems and products and ways of work that are not something that the franchise dictates from the get-go, then franchise is probably not for you.
Definitely. And from their end too, it's they might have stock owners and they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the brand.
Absolutely.
Any other types of people where you think a franchise might not be suited?
Well, there's the capital aspect as well. Franchises are, by definition, not very cheap businesses. So, if you could, for example, set up a very local, friendly English school or a games store, let's call it, or even a fast food franchise. For example, we all know a lot of people who have come to Japan and set up a little hole-in-the-wall kebab shop, right? Those sort of operations you can probably buy into fairly easily for 2-3 million yen or 4 million yen at most. I've yet to see a franchise operation that starts at less than, let's say, 6 or 7 million in capital. And normally
Gotcha.
they would range somewhere between 8 to 12 million in startup capital. And then you also want to, because you'll be following a set framework, you're not going to be able to make huge leaps and bounds with marketing and advertising and generating revenue. So you also want to give yourself runway. Franchisors tend to estimate somewhere between 6 to 8 months before the business becomes profitable. We're, again, a lot more conservative. So we would normally assume, say, up to a year of being in the red. So you need to give yourself at least that startup capital, again, in runway capital, just until the business stands on its feet. So if you don't have the 15, 20, 25 million yen that it would take to invest and give yourself the runway, you probably want to set up something smaller and more manageable yourself. But that would, again, not be applicable if you're doing it remotely, only if you're here physically, boots on the ground.
And to make a physical location business and let's say let's say make a profit after 1 year, that's actually a pretty good amount. Like 1 year is actually pretty good. If you were to do it on your own with a physical location, it would probably take you probably 2 years, I think.
I guess it depends on the business. Again, so we're not experts on any kind of businesses. I think some of them do. If we take the franchises, for example, some of them definitely do become profitable after a shorter period of time. But because they're heavier beasts, both on setup and on advertising and marketing, then they usually take slightly longer than that. Yeah.
And so how much could you give the total amount again that a person, maybe the range of capital they would need for a franchise with the friend? And
so the cheapest ones that we've seen so far are between 5 to 7 million yen. And those are things like, for example, automated vending machines, for example, foreign exchange machines, the types that you see in department stores or hotels or whatnot, where your initial capital is just the cost of the machine itself, which can be up to maybe 6, 7 million yen. And then everything else is based on a commission of how much you're actually making. So you don't have any rent per month. You don't have to pay any royalties per month. You only pay a commission of how much you've actually run through the machine cash-wise. But normally they would start at more than that. They would normally start at around 9 million yen for setup and another 9, 10 million yen for one way.
gotcha. And what are some industries in Japan that have franchises? So I think you mentioned maybe currency exchange. I would say obviously restaurants. I know there's some language school ones, but what are some other types of franchises?
So similar to other countries, there's a franchise for everything in Japan. So the case studies and the franchises that we've been in contact with range from anything from, again, after-school tutorings, like Kumon, for example, the most famous after-school tutoring center in Japan. That's a franchise, right? Obviously, all of the convenience stores, all of the fast food restaurants, and quite a few, maybe not gourmet, but quite a few mid-range and higher-range restaurant chains as well. You've got your boxing gyms, regular gyms. I've run across recently at the Osaka Franchise Expo, I've run across a play casino franchise. So they rent a place in a good city location. They've got the entire casino set up, except it's not for money. They just train your dealers and they help you to make an entertainment casino kind of thing. Parking lots, real estate companies, obviously, same as overseas. I mean, the lot. There's really a franchise for everything. We're now opening one for a customer that's a disabled group home franchise. So they let people who are, they're not quite in need of constant care, but they're also not quite in a position where they're able to fully integrate into normal society. So they live in a group home where it's occupied during the day by people who can help them, a licensed manager, and then overnight they have just one or two people staying there in case they need help with medicine or anything of that sort. So really a franchise for everything.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think I also saw, I think on your website, that's kind of like a used luxury brand item shop.
Yep. That's the first one we've opened on behalf of a customer, actually.
Gotcha. So cool. No, that's interesting. That's
Yeah, so you'd come in with your secondhand Louis Vuitton or old heirloom family jewelry that you need to sell either because you need the money or because you want to upgrade or whatever the case may be. The franchise then verifies the authenticity of the item, buys it from you at a good price, and then sells it on back channels, either on the internet or back to franchise headquarters, who then sell it in their own ways at a larger profit.
gotcha. And I think my next question would be, so I think we understand now that let's say they can provide the training, they have the systems and processes, they have the relationship with the vendors, distributors. How do they support on the companies on the marketing end?
So this is part of the due diligence process that we do on franchisors, is to see how much support they can actually provide. Because one of the ways we choose them is there are quite a few franchises out there that just give you the brand name and then they're like, go do what you want with it. So, we're originally a yakiniku shop, but if you want to sell yakitori or takoyaki, that's okay too. You can put our brand name up there and just pay us the royalties. Those are not the franchises that we want to work with, because again, we're managing on behalf of people who don't necessarily have experience in that field or are remote in most cases. So we want something that's very clearly supported all along the way, and that does include marketing and advertising. But what you'll find in Japan is that marketing and advertising tends to be, like everything else, very old school, in the sense that it's giving out tissue packs on the street or putting flyers in people's mailboxes or within local newspapers that are then distributed to mailboxes and so forth. So we are allowed to, and we do regularly try to introduce online marketing, social media profiles, Google reviews, Yahoo Japan reviews, whatever the case may be. Franchise operators are aware of the market in that regard, so they do allow you to advertise and market in this way, but they're usually not going to be able to guide you in doing that. That's where we need to come in and introduce some other outsourced experts who can help with that.
Yeah, that's something I've seen from my end as well. Like in terms of like the offline marketing, they're pretty supportive. Like also they give you like flags, also like the kind of sales scripts as well. But when it comes to digital marketing, they
And that
probably
works, right? In Japan, especially if you've got a very local type of business, that does work. You will definitely get the foot traffic. They've done it for years. They know what they're doing. But increasingly, more and more people are obviously looking for the shops or the businesses that they want to visit online. Like you and I, if we want to, book a restaurant for the evening, we're not going to walk the street and look at restaurants. We're going to look online, right? So we do need to help them transition into the modern world, but not to knock them down. They do very good business even with their offline marketing, right?
No, I think yeah, like you mentioned like Google Maps, Yahoo Maps.
Yeah.
I've helped about probably 20 companies rank in the top 3 for like Google Maps, and I actually track the data like Google search versus Google Maps. But yeah, it's definitely worth doing, and the amount of effort is
Absolutely.
pretty
Yeah.
low
And
based on the return.
I mean, line ads, for example, are huge in Japan, right? There's no reason, it's a Japanese company, even there's no reason for them not to be able, and they are coming that way, but they're not necessarily all there yet. So they do give you the freedom to do as you want on that regard. What they'll also do is, depending on how big the brand is, they'll have national TV advertising. They'll have national newspaper advertising with a big logo of the brand, so that when people do see your sign and brand on the street next to where they are, or they pick you up on Google Maps or whatnot, you're already associated with that brand. So on that front, they're very good as well. But local advertising would be limited to just them guiding you through how to do it, giving you the suppliers that could do it affordably, and then it's up to you to then hand out the tissues or the flyers or put the sign out or do the online marketing as you will.
So I guess the next topic I would kind of want to dive into is kind of choosing the right franchise for you. I think we've talked a little bit about it, like and like going with a service like yours, like where you could actually vet the companies in advance. But Like, based on your experience, what are some potential other dangers to look for when choosing a franchise?
Well, obviously, how long they've been at it, right? The first thing you want to know is how long they've been at it, how many locations they've got, and whether those locations are operating or still profitable. You want to confirm with them how many franchisees, let's say in the last 12 or 24 months, have actually opened and then closed shop, because that would give you an indication of potentially not necessarily something being wrong. In many cases, again, especially if it's foreigners involved, in many cases they just lack the patience to let the business run its course until it becomes profitable. But if it does look like a trend, you definitely want to be a little bit cautious. And from our perspective, again, like we said, we want our hand held throughout the way. We don't want to just be given the logo and the brand name and say, and then be told to just go for it on our own. We want them to constantly take care of staff training, because it's not just the initial stuff. Obviously, staff comes and goes. Store managers even come and go. We do want to make sure that the training is going to be readily available for replacement staff as well. And we want to know that we can pick up the phone or send an email and explain what's happening this month in the store and get some good consulting and good advice on how to improve things, how to troubleshoot. So we try to gauge their responsiveness, not just with the initial communication, because that always goes through the franchisee sales department. We want to know that once we've actually started working with them, there's still somebody there that we can regularly pick up the phone and call for advice. So those are the types of things that we'd normally check on. And it doesn't just apply to ongoing training and advertising and marketing. We want to know that we are able to just pick up the phone or send an email and explain about a problem that we've got in the store or lack of profitability, and get advice on how to fine-tune and tweak our performance, get advice on how to deal with various issues concerning suppliers that they may have already run into in the past. So we try to gauge that by how responsive and how communicative they are, not just during the sales process, but afterwards when we're actually negotiating the contract and we're asking questions. And we want to know that the responsiveness will continue throughout the lifetime of the operation.
Gotcha. No, I totally agree with that. Just having someone you can talk to, like especially a monthly basis, to do the things you mentioned, like let's say better optimize, and yeah, pretty much so you don't have to figure it out yourself. I mean, that's what you're paying the franchise for, anyways.
Correct.
And when working with the franchisor, do you normally have like one person, like kind of like an account manager? How does that typically
With a
work?
good franchise, that's going to be the case, yes. So you're going to have an account manager that's either allocated to a particular aspect of the business or to a particular location. And they would be accompanying you for example, when you're selecting the location or the venue, they would be providing listings that they think would suit, and then they would come with you to inspect those listings in person if they're within that same location, or they would connect to you via a Zoom call just so you can show them a walkthrough of the venue before you decide to rent it or not. They will also attend the opening, the first week or opening days. They will also attend. So after the training usually involves the designated store manager going off to franchise headquarters and receiving a few days of, or a week or two of training, depending on the complexity of the business. And then within the first 7 days of the business opening its doors to the public, the account manager will be there with you to guide you through the first few days and the initial operations that you've been trained on, but you haven't actually done. When we say you, we mean the store manager. They haven't actually done it in person yet. So they will be, again, if it's a good franchise, they will be accompanying you throughout the initial 1 or 2 weeks as well.
Gotcha. And so I think people on the podcast, I think they probably have a general sense of franchise, but I'm curious, were there anything about Japanese franchises that were different than kind of like your expectations or experience with other franchises? Or is there any kind of like a unique cultural insights that you have about Japanese franchises?
So they're different, but they're different in a way that's very Japanese and would be very familiar to people who have done anything business-wise with Japan. So, for example, if you look at a franchise contract in the West, it's usually 40 or 50 pages long, and there are constant threats on what will happen if you break the contract, and litigation may occur and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't happen with the Japanese. It's basically everything is assumed to be in good faith. So there will be general guidelines on the obviously the business relationship and what constitutes a contract breach and so forth. But it's 7 or 8 pages. A lot of it is left vague on purpose because they want to just manage the relationship and give you advice along the way without having to stick to any legal obligations. So on the one hand, they're not super flexible because they're still a franchise, but they are a lot more flexible than franchises overseas. And the other thing is that during the decision-making process as well, when, for example, you're selecting the location to rent, or when you're trying to pick the right staff for the job, or interviewing managers or whatnot, their advice would be very gentle Japanese kind of advice. So it's not going to be, no, that's a bad location, that's a bad candidate. They're like, oh, it's entirely up to you, of course, but we think there could be some advantages to hiring this person or selecting this. So same as with everything in Japan, you really have to read between the lines. They are holding your hand, but they're not going to aggressively tell you when you're making a mistake.
Gotcha,
They're going
yeah.
to make gentle Japanese style suggestions, which is not something that you experience a lot in a B2B environment overseas.
Gotcha. So I guess also you should probably go out of your way to confirm things with them as well, right?
Absolutely, as with everything Japan. Yeah.
Excellent. And so I know you do. I
And
mean, in
also,
your
sorry,
case,
I'll just add one more point on that. And this is something that we've repeatedly told real estate investors over the years as well, is that if you, as the business owner, as the franchisee, if you will force your way, they will allow you to do that, right? So the Japanese franchisor is not going to say, no, you can't sell this product, you can't do that. I mean, they might have some rules about how you can use their logo, but aside from that, they're not going to force you into picking the location that they think, or the person that you think, or doing things in a certain way. So once you show any kind of resistance, they will back off, but it's just not in your best interest to insist on stuff. They know what they're doing, so you should definitely take their advice on it.
some solid advice. And so in your case, you have vetted let's say, or in your case, because you're helping Japanese franchisors find, let's say, foreign investors or foreign franchisees, obviously you have to do a lot of probably more due diligence than they do. But from your end, what is an ideal person that you would probably help, or what do you say, or would have a pretty successful chance of doing well in Japan?
Well, there's two aspects to it. Firstly, because like we mentioned at the beginning of the recording, because we really need to take care of and nourish our Japanese side relationships a lot more so than the client side. We, same as we've done with NTI with the real estate, we get paid in advance, because that for us is the initial screening of anyone who's serious enough to do some work. So we're happy to jump on calls, provide Q&A, dig into particular franchises and tell them what's up there and how much, we think it might cost and what the case studies look like. But once somebody wants to initiate negotiations with a franchisor, we need to be engaged and we need to be paid. That's not going to happen before that. So that immediately screens out, I'd say 70 to 80% of the, no offense, I'm a gaijin myself, but the gaijin tire kickers. And then beyond that, we try to gauge, and we'll hopefully be able to gauge that before we put anything down in writing and before they start, constructing the contract with the franchisor. We make sure that they realize that they have to be patient. So if someone's looking for a quick turnover bucks, like set up and, be an overnight success and start reeling in the money, that's not something that's going to happen. I would argue it's not going to happen in any business environment aside from, a very select few, but definitely not going to happen with a franchise operation. So we would try to weed out the people who we deem are extremely impatient and are pushing forward strongly because they want to get things done their way and as soon as possible. But somebody who is looking for, and also the people who are just don't have realistic expectations. So if somebody is expecting to be rolling in 60, 70, 80% a year, steadily over time in ROI, we're just going to have to disappoint them down the track. So we try to only take on people with reasonable expectations and with the patience to handle the journey, kind of thing. And we want to make sure that they have the capital, not just to pay us for the initial engagement, but to also take them through the first year of potentially being in the red. So we're not going to dig into their bank statements or ask them for financial references, but we do have the experience over the last 11 years of doing similar business. We do have the experience of gauging if somebody's comfortable with the capital that they would need to spend or not. If somebody's constantly pinching pennies from the get-go and okay, can we try to reduce this because this is going to that's going to be difficult for me, that's not a person who should be investing in a brand new business that may take a year to take off. So that's probably somebody that we also would try to maybe direct towards other investment channels.
Excellent. That is some excellent feedback. I'm kind of curious. I think some listeners might be thinking like, are there any foreign franchises that I could use in Japan? But
yeah, definitely. But they would all have a Japanese franchisor headquarters. So it's not going to be easier or smoother to get into the franchise if it's an international franchise, because they're still going to be very Japanese. So obviously, all of the fast food chains are here, McDonald's and Pizza Hut, and I think Kinko, which is surprising.
Kinko's,
yeah. People who don't live in the US don't actually know that Kinko is a US-based company. They've just integrated so well into the market here. The real estate franchises, Remax, Century 21, they're all very active in Japan. But again, their presence here on the ground is extremely Japanese. So you shouldn't expect to just waltz in there and everybody can, accommodate you in English and you can immediately sign up as a non-resident foreigner. It's not that easy. And if you're a non-resident foreigner, there are other hurdles to jump through as well. So that's another reason for our existence, is that, for example, the franchisers may be willing or open to taking on foreign investors, but that doesn't mean that you can easily open a company bank account in Japan. It doesn't mean that you can easily rent a store to start working in Japan. So those hurdles will still exist even if you're dealing with a foreign franchise.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think every foreigner or most foreigners who come here to try to do things themselves, they get a really big shock of how hard it is to make a bank account on your own.
Yeah,
and also get your first real estate.
Yeah, I got Japanese friends who have set up new companies and are still struggling to open Japanese bank accounts. It's not, and obviously being a foreigner makes it a lot harder, right?
And I heard like a ridiculous number, like I think Mizuho Bank like accepts less than 10% of like business account applications.
Yeah.
It's like, and this is not just foreigners, it's Japanese as well.
Yeah, but I mean, look, they're being slowly but surely edged out of the market by the online banks. They are a lot more open to this kind of thing. They accept a lot more, English communications. They provide more English services, and they take you on even as a new company. Sure, they still ask you for the due diligence. They do the due diligence. They ask you for documents. They want to see the company registration. They want to know your business plan. But you're not going to reject it if you have all of that. Whereas the brick and mortar banks are still very fossilized in their ways.
Yeah, so I think for the listeners, I think Rakuten Online, SBI Online, and I think Aozora Online.
GMO Aozora, yeah. PayPay Bank is a good one. They actually have a banking arm as well. Yeah. And what's the other one? Sony Bank, but that's not, I don't think they do businesses. They only do personal accounts. I hope they'll do it one day. The disadvantage going with an online bank down the track is most of them don't do loans. So if at some point you want to, or they might do small personal loans. If at some point you want to leverage your business profitability and get a loan to expand your business and so forth, you will at that point probably need to set up shop with a brick and mortar bank. But it does become a lot easier after you've got 5 or 6 years of profitability under your belt. Then the brick and mortar banks can see a paper trail, and they'll probably bring you on as a customer. And at that point, you should be able to apply for a loan as well.
That is excellent advice. Any other kind of like, I think you mentioned, again, the bank account is a little bit tough. Anything regarding like the visa that someone should be aware of, or like doing it to get, or sorry, maybe they'll like to get like the business visa.
Yeah, so the business visa is easier. And this is obviously, we're no immigration lawyers. So this is just off conversations we've had with our partnered immigration lawyers and customers and so forth. The business visa side of things actually tends to be easier. It is possible, definitely, if you're running a franchise business, because you've set up a company, you've hired staff, you're paying tax in Japan, so that all satisfies the on-paper requirements for a visa. But business visas tend to be approved more easily if the business is not as strict. So with the very, very strict franchise contracts, and there are some of them out there, especially the ones that need, like, for example, the secondhand dealers goods need a license from the police because they need to be able to identify stolen goods. The group homes franchise need to have a licensed medical certified site manager on site. So any of those franchises that require some licensing will naturally be more strict in their contractual requirements from the franchisee. And the more strict it is, the more it seems to the immigration department as if you're actually an employee and not a business owner. So that is a bit of a balance that we need to walk, is that it will be easier for you to get a business visa if you're dealing with one of the slightly looser franchises, for example, the fast food shops. But then the other thing is that if you are capable of setting up your own business and you don't need to use the franchising method, then the business visa becomes even easier. So if you do have the option to physically relocate to Japan and physically open a business that you'll be able to run profitably and do everything on your own without any constricting contract from a franchisor, your chances for a business management visa being approved are either higher, or it will simply be approved in a shorter period of time. Whereas under the franchise, they might ask you to, okay, well, can you do like a 3-month trial period and show us that you're actually, generating a profit and so forth. So it is definitely possible under a franchise operation, but it should be a relatively loose franchise contract.
Thanks for sharing that. And do you have any final tips for people, I guess, considering a franchise?
Just the things we've already discussed. So be patient. You're starting a business, even though it's got a lower risk factor than a business that you'll have to reinvent the wheel all on your own, but it is still a business. It's still seasonal. It still fluctuates. It's still economy dependent, and it still takes time to get into the green. So if you need to have the patience, and of course you need to have the capital. So look at the case studies. If it's us, we'll provide them. If you're dealing directly with a franchise chain, they'll provide them in a more marketing-oriented manner. So you do want to pick out the numbers and confirm them with them, because what they show you in their case studies is not necessarily the less profitable franchises. They'll obviously pick the best cases to case study and dig into the numbers so that you can figure out not just how much starting capital you need, but also how much running capital you'll need. And as with all things investments, add 25% to the costs that you're projecting and reduce at least 25% from the income you're projecting, and then see if the numbers still work. That works for any business, definitely for franchises as well.
I think that's some solid advice. And I guess where can people learn more about you and find you on the internet?
So I personally, best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Ziv Nakajima. Again, there's only one of me out there with that name. The franchise and relocation company is called Nippon Bridge. So double P for Nippon and all one word, nipponbridge.com. And the real estate company is nippontradings.com.
Cool. And we'll have a link to everything in the show notes below. And also I think we'll link to your YouTube channel as well.
Oh, that would be great.
And
YouTube channel, the podcast. Yeah, I mean, if you look for the Japan Real Estate Podcast, you'll find it easily enough. We haven't set up a franchising Japan podcast yet, but once we're officially advertising and promoting the service and we've got those first 2 clients well in the green, then we'll definitely have a podcast and the YouTube channel for that as well.
And what type of content do you cover on the real estate podcast and YouTube channel?
anything that people want to talk about. So a lot of investment related content, how to do due diligence, how the purchase process works, what things you need to watch out for, what you can and cannot do as a resident or non-resident person living in Japan. We've also got the Japan Real Estate Experts Panel, which is on average every 1 or 2 episodes, we have like a round table of people who specialize in different areas in the Japanese real estate sector. And we all just shoot the shit kind of thing. Don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your podcast. We
Totally
all just, so we all just banter away. We take in questions from viewers. And there's also a bit of content, just the kind of house porn that you'd expect to see, like walkthrough of old Akia houses, beautifully renovated places, investment property tours with customers, that sort of thing.
Cool. But thank you for coming on the podcast, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you, Ziv.
Same here, Tyson. Keep up the good work. So there you have it. All you ever wanted to know about franchising in Japan, and probably a few things you didn't know that you wanted to know. And if you're interested in these opportunities, please don't be shy. Drop us a line on info@nipponbridge.com. That's NIPPON, info@nipponbridge.com, all one word. Or find us on Facebook under Nippon Bridge. We've got 2 pages there, one for these investment opportunities and one for relocation support services. We'd be happy to hear from you on any of those. We're always happy to talk shop, and we would love to hear from you. So that's it from us for today. Hope you've enjoyed our chat with Tyson, and we hope to see you again very, very soon.